This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution has rejected allegations that Tehran is developing nuclear weapons. Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei described the accusations raised by some Western states as baseless and said Iranians have no use for nuclear weapons. He said nuclear weapons are against Iran's religious principles. Ayatollah Khamenei also warned neighboring countries about enemies' plots to foment discord in the region and said foreigners are the source of insecurity in the Persian Gulf. The United States and its allies claim Iran is seeking atomic bombs under the guise of its nuclear program. Tehran, a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, rejects the allegations and says it requires the nuclear technology to meet its energy demands. Well, the Iranian Navy has taken charge of its first indigenously designed and developed destroyer. The warship was unveiled by the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, in the presence of Navy officials. The Mabhouh-class vessel has a displacement of around 1,400 tons and is equipped with modern radars and electronic warfare capabilities. It has a top speed of up to 30 knots and has a helipad. Jamal can carry 120 to 140 personnel on board and is armed with a variety of anti-ship and surface-to-air missiles. This, as well as torpedoes and modern naval cannons. The destroyer's launch marks a major technological leap for Iran's naval industries. More ships in its class are under construction. Well, in other news, 2 NATO soldiers have been killed in gun battles in 2 separate incidents in Afghanistan. According to the International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, one of the soldiers was killed during Operation Mushtarak. The other was killed elsewhere in southern Afghanistan. The identities of the soldiers have not been released. 6 NATO soldiers were killed in Afghanistan on Thursday. 12 soldiers have been killed in Operation Mushtarak so far. The assault is aimed at taking control of an area of Helmand province called Marja from the Taliban. It is now entering its 2nd week. Well, hundreds of people in northwestern Pakistani city of Peshawar have protested the army offensive in tribal area, claiming the operation is mainly targeting the tribal people. They also expressed resentment at U.S. drone attacks in the country.
In recent months, there have been numerous rallies across Pakistan in protest at the ongoing military operation in the tribal belt and the U.S. violation of the country's sovereignty in the form of drone attacks. The main religious party of the country, Jamaat Islami, organized a demonstration in Peshawar on Friday to urge government to stop its offensive in the tribal areas. It says was undertaken under U.S. pressure and has killed more civilians than militants.
We condemn the current situation which was created by Pakistan Army on the order of Mr. Obama, and that we condemn also drone attacks on the tribal area, and especially we condemn the matter of our great leader Harun Rashid's mother.
According to data released by Inter-Services Public Relations, since the so-called war on terror began in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, 30,452 Pakistanis, both civilians and military, have been killed or injured in the terror-related incidents or operations.
This protest is organized against the ongoing military operation in which innocent civilians are being killed much more than the militants. In the name of aid, President Zardari, like Musharraf, is also hoping to get more money by killing our own people.
While fighting the militants, the army has targeted hundreds of houses in the tribal areas, alleging they were hideouts of the suspected militants. This is a claim not confirmed by the local residents, who say in most cases civilians are in the firing line.
While pursuing the operation against the militants, the army bombed our house. The whole structure of the house was razed to ground. My mother and my niece were killed under the rebels.
Similarly, US drones have fired some 40 missiles in the tribal regions of Pakistan just since the beginning of 2010, killing more than 150 people, which included only one wanted insurgent, while the overall toll of such attacks stands at 925. This has given an immense rise to the anti-American sentiments among the people of Pakistan. Tribal people of Pakistan have been buffeted from two sides. At times, they get caught in the crossfire between the militants and the Pakistani army, and at others, they find themselves at the mercy of US Hellfire Predator drones. Zahid Hussain, Press TV, Peshawar.
Al Arabiya channel has learned that two reformist leaders, Mir Hussein Mousavi and Mehdi Karoubi, met for the first time since last Thursday's demonstration that was held on the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. They discussed a new strategy for the reformist opposition movement. According to sources closely associated with the two leaders, they will issue a joint press statement to explain the new reformist strategy in light of the new developments.
Perhaps this is in response to Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's statement, in which he considered the demonstration organized by the government in commemoration of the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in Iran to be a final testimony for everyone. He called on reformist opposition leaders to come back to their senses by supporting the revolution and the regime. Mir Hossein Mousavi and Mehdi Karoubi, the two reformist leaders who opposed the results of Iran's presidential election, met for the first time since last Thursday's demonstration that was held on the anniversary of Iran's Islamic Revolution to discuss a new strategy for the reformist opposition movement. They strongly criticized the regime's attempt to take away people's right to participate in the anniversary of the revolution, and for using it to legitimize the regime and undermine the reformist opposition movement. They also warned that the regime has been infiltrated by elements that have been pushing for violence and militarization in Iran. They declared that the reformists will not stop demanding their rights while abiding by the constitution. The meeting between Mousavi and Karoubi came only hours after a speech was given by Supreme Leader Khamenei, in which he responded to a statement by opposition leaders saying that the revolution has diverged from the goals set by Imam Khamenei. The reformist also said that the legitimacy of the regime is being tested. Consul General at the Iranian embassy in Oslo, Norway, Mohammad Reza Hidari, resigned from his post and joined the reformist opposition over the regime's suppression of peaceful demonstrations. The former Iranian diplomat confirmed by phone that the Norwegian authorities agreed to grant him political asylum. He called on the rest of the Iranian diplomats to join the Green Movement that became the symbol of the reformist opposition in Iran. Hidari announced the establishment of what he called the Diplomatic Green Movement to urge Iranian diplomats to resign from their posts and join the Green opposition movement in Iran. Naja Muhammad Ali, Al Arabiya.
Dr. Ali Nourizada, the director of the Center of Arab and Iranian Studies in London, joins us. What general predictions do you have for the reformist new strategy?
Greetings to you and your dear audience. This meeting was important. Ordinary Iranians were anticipating it and awaiting its results. It seems that Mir Hussein Mousavi and Mehdi Karoubi, in lieu of what happened on February 11th, and in addition to the roughness used by security agencies against innocent civilians, they will announce a new strategy. The most important part of this strategy is the continuation of demonstrations. This time, however, the opposition will choose the day on which the demonstrations will take place, not the regime. In other words, the opposition will not rely on the regime's evaluations.
Is this an escalation?
Of course, because the regime uses oppressive means. The regime also sentenced a 21-year-old man to death. In addition, the opposition's possible call for a strike is an aspect of the new strategy. Pressure is being exerted on Mousavi to call on oil workers to stop working 1 day a week to start with and see what the reaction of the regime will be.
Returning now to the assassination of Hamas military commander Mabhouh. Foreign ministry sources today indicated that Israel's ambassadors will not take responsibility for the killing. IBA's Brian Freeman spoke about the diplomatic fallout with former Foreign Ministry Director General Alon Liel.
Today, our regional and global situation is worse than it was in incidents we had in the 90s and during the last decade. And this is very bothering because countries that feel themselves offended are not judging on the merit anymore. If the guy was a terrorist or if he was dangerous to the free world, this has become not relevant. They are acting politically now and trying to embarrass Israel and maybe punish Israel. It's a little bit similar to what happened a few months ago with the Goldstone report. I'm sure that most of the countries that voted in favor of the Goldstone report didn't even read the report, but they wanted to send a signal. And while your international situation is so shaky, countries can do much more damage to Israel's image than they can usually do.
So what can Israel do to contain the situation?
First of all, I don't know who did it, and the whole world is assuming it's Israel. And, I think that the military has from time to time to defend us, and the intelligence has from time to time to carry out operations. But diplomacy has to adjust itself to the circumstances and work very hard to soften and try to minimize the damage. And with the kind of diplomacy we have today, our action is only aggravating the situation.
Several political groups condemn the current government's complete silence in regards to the innocent people being killed in the bloody attack launched by the U.S. occupation forces in Duchat village in Misan province.
A new crime has been added to the U.S. occupation's terrible record, which is already filled with repeated crimes. Meanwhile, the government is completely silent toward the crimes committed by the occupation forces against the Iraqi people's rights. The village of Duachat is subordinate to Ali Sharki district north of Amara city, capital of Misan province. Duachat was continuously violated by U.S. occupation forces who killed 10 citizens during an attack on the village. Eyewitnesses said that during the attack, one of the residents of the village shot in the air, thinking that a thief was trying to steal from him. The U.S. occupation forces responded with a shower of gunshots that killed him and members of his family.
A plane came and landed over there. The people here have sheep, and they thought that someone was trying to steal them, so they went out to protect them. This man went out to protect his sheep, and they killed him and his son. Another man and his wife were killed. They broke their legs and killed them.
An official police source confirmed that all the killed and injured were from the same family, indicating that the occupation arrested 12 people in the village, including an ambulance driver who tried to pick up the victims. The U.S. occupation army admitted the crime took place, but claimed that numerous people spread around the residential complex opened fire on the joint security forces. The army said that this prompted members of the forces to open fire, which led to the death of a number of people, it described as hostile. The Misan Provincial Council held an urgent meeting and issued a statement demanding financial and moral compensation for the victims. The audacity of the U.S. occupation troops to commit this bold crime places a big question mark on the nature of the compliance agreement signed by the current government and the administration of the U.S. occupation. The agreement stipulated that occupation forces should withdraw to certain military bases outside of Iraqi cities, and that the government security institutions should take over the responsibility of internal security. This leads to another question. Was this attack carried out with the knowledge of Maliki's government or not? Either answer to this question is equally bad. The French newspaper Le Parisien reported that soldiers were deliberately exposed to nuclear tests conducted by France in the beginning of the 1960s in Algeria in order to study the effects of nuclear arms on humans.
Between 1960 and 1966, France conducted its nuclear tests, tests whose effect persists today on French soldiers and citizens of Algeria's Sahara Desert. In today's French daily newspaper, Le Parisien, it published excerpts from a military report, a report that indicates that French soldiers were deliberately exposed to nuclear tests conducted by France in Algeria at the beginning of the 60s. This report explains the details of a nuclear test conducted in April 1961, an experiment whose purpose was to study the atomic weapon's physiological and psychological effects on man in order to obtain elements necessary to prepare soldiers physically and morally for modern combat. The French Minister of Defense said that he has no knowledge of the report and that he has asked his office to declassify secret files so that every person that thinks they were a victim can look at the reports and receive compensation according to a new law.
The bill will allow compensation for victims of the nuclear tests for all the damages that they endured, and it will apply the same rules to everyone.
Thousands of old soldiers submitted to nuclear testing who believe they were exposed to radiation are demanding an acknowledgement of the damages they incurred.
Joining me from Algeria's capital, journalist Faisal Matawi from the Algerian Al Watan newspaper. Mr. Matawi, this report is nothing new for Algerians, journalists, historians, and politicians.
Yes, because researchers and historians concluded this finding years ago. Exposing people to nuclear radiation, this exposure on French soldiers first, and then they were taken to the Bossuet Center in France, in addition to the exposure on Algerians. According to historians, military authorities back then in 1960 conducted the first test that was called the Blue Jerboa. It yielded 70 kilotons, which is the equivalent of 4 bombs dropped on Japan's Hiroshima. The authorities asked the residents to leave their homes, open their windows and doors, and also exposed others who were about 30 kilometers away from the center. In turn, the French report does not reveal anything new except for one essential point, which is that the report published in Le Parisien newspaper says that from the 17 tests that took place in the Algerian Sahara Desert between 1960 and 1967, only one test was completely controlled, meaning that in all the other experiments, there was contamination and major radiation leaks.
But Mr. Matawi, right now the French defense minister asked his office to declassify the secret documents. Will this constitute a legal basis for the victims to demand compensation?
Yes, this is an essential issue because the victims in Algeria, in Polynesia, and even in France, because there is the Association for French Nuclear Test Veterans, AVEN, which has been campaigning for more than 10 years without anyone listening to it. This is a legal rule because declassifying the documents will allow the victims, and there are many of them who died, who are demanding the French government to first acknowledge the test, then compensate them, and finally purify the regions in Algeria where the testing was conducted. And there are many regions in Ergal and Inakar.
From Algeria, Faisal Matawi from the Al Watan newspaper. Thank you very much.
بعد
After a 20-year-long interruption, the first passenger train departing from the Iraqi city of Mosul has arrived to the city of Gaziantep in southeastern Turkey. The train is scheduled to make a weekly round trip between the two countries. It takes the train nearly 18 hours to travel in each direction.
With its whistle blowing and wheels screaming, the first train departing from the Iraqi city of Mosul has arrived at the station of Gaziantep in southeastern Turkey after 20 years of service interruption. The reopening of the Mosul-Gaziantep Railroad will help revive the historic railroad linking Turkey and Iraq, as well as boost trade between them. Turkey is helping Iraq upgrade its railway network, hoping to replace the current fleet with high-speed trains in the near future.
Today's trip from Mosul to Gaziantep is the first step to revive the historic Hijaz Railroad linking Iraq to Turkey. These types of trips will be more productive if they ease up travel restrictions at the train station and cancel unnecessary stops.
The Mosul train, which crossed Syria, has only 13 passengers on board. This is the train's first trip, and it lasted 18 hours. Despite the difficult and long journey, it seems that the passengers enjoyed it.
The journey was pleasant, thank God. The children were able to sleep and rest. Thank God the ride was comfortable and the trip was pleasant.
The journey was very good, despite some of the difficulties we faced, such as delays. This is the train's first trip.
Last January, Turkey and its neighbor Syria inaugurated the first railroad linking Gaziantep and Aleppo at a rate of 2 trips a week, including passenger and freight services. Currently, it takes the train nearly 3.5 hours to travel between the two countries. However, a new high-speed train is expected to go into service next week. This will cut the travel time between Turkey and Syria to nearly an hour. After linking the city of Gaziantep with Aleppo in Syria and Mosul in Iraq, the Turkish government is planning to link the Haydar Pasha station in Istanbul with Gaziantep to serve as a European hub for travelers heading to Arab countries, Asia, and even Africa in the future. The Haydar Pasha station is considered to be Istanbul's first gate to Anatolia and the Middle East during the reign of Othman Sultan Abdul Hamid al-Thani in 1906. Several trains depart from the Haydar Pasha station to cities in Anatolia and to areas along the Iranian, Syrian, and Iraqi borders. If railroads are developed between Turkey and its neighbors, the Haydar Pasha station will play a vital role in the transport of goods and passengers between the West and the East. Abdul Nasser Singhi, BBC, Istanbul.
U.S. and Pakistani intelligence nab the second most senior Afghan Taliban commander. Pakistani media barely covers the news of the arrest. Why all the secrecy? And will this lead to the capture of Osama bin Laden? Answers to these questions and more on Link TV's Mosaic Intelligence Report.
Not too long after some 15,000 U.S., British, and Afghan national forces launched the largest attack on Taliban forces since President Obama signed orders to send 30,000 additional U.S. troops to Afghanistan, news broke of the arrest of the second most senior Afghan Taliban commander since 2001, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar. According to officials, he was seized in Pakistan in a secret raid by U.S. and Pakistani intelligence forces several days ago. His capture reflects a markedly changed attitude by the Pakistani intelligence toward an insurgent force that the country had allowed to operate with relative impunity for the past 8 years. Stunned by the success of this operation, however, a Taliban spokesman denied reports of Mullah Baradar's capture, saying he was still in Afghanistan, actively organizing the group's military and political activities.
Mullah Baradar has not been arrested. He is in Afghanistan. I don't know who spread this rumor, but it's absolutely false.
Qari Muhammad Yusuf, a spokesman for the Taliban, said in a statement. Meanwhile, the Pakistani media's response to the arrest of Mullah Baradar has been surprisingly muted. The arrest made international headlines throughout the day this past Tuesday, but Pakistani newspapers and television channels barely covered the news, with some completely ignoring it. Analysts say that the blackout was because Pakistan's government and army have been wary of being perceived as an American lapdog. Any collaboration with the United States in its war on terror in Afghanistan has become increasingly unpopular in Pakistan since Asif Ali Zardari government took power in 2008.
It's important to stop the criminals. These crimes should be stopped by keeping an eye on where they take place in the US and Pakistan. The presence of those involved in terrorism does not benefit the country, regardless of whether they are from the Taliban or other groups.
The United States joined our country's leaders in the name of the war on terrorism, but no one from the Taliban was arrested. They will arrest anyone and say that he is the associate of Mullah Omar.
The US and Afghanistan have repeatedly pressed Pakistan to do more to combat Taliban and Al-Qaeda fighters operating in its territory. But Pakistan's spy agencies have long been accused of protecting top Afghan Taliban leaders, many of whom are believed to have fled to Pakistan during the US-led invasion, to use them as tools to counter Indian influence in Afghanistan when the Americans withdraw. Many analysts believe that the Pakistani government has realized that the Taliban is too much of a threat to them since an all-out war between the Pakistani army and the Taliban broke out in Swat Valley last year, leaving many civilians killed and hundreds of thousands displaced. The honeymoon is over, commented Iftikhar Muhammad, a freelance reporter and an expert on Pakistani affairs. According to him, the Pakistani intelligence apparatus and the army have been complacent in the past in curbing the terrorist activities of both the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. What could this mean for the hunt for Osama bin Laden, who is often said to be hiding along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border? The answer depends on the information provided to interrogators in the coming few days. Baradar was the main link between Mullah Omar and field commanders and knows of the whereabouts of the Taliban leadership, according to security experts. In 1998, the Taliban regime mulled turning bin Laden over to the Saudi government, but the man who Osama bin Laden once called Amir al-Mu'mineen, or Commander of the Faithful, interceded.
I think that the starting premise is you don't make peace with your friends. You have to be willing to engage with your enemies.
U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has recently said that while the United States backed the Taliban integration program, the offer did not include the group's top leadership. Earlier in late January, Jeff Murrell, the spokesman for U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates, suggested that the United States could not negotiate with Mullah Omar because he has the blood of thousands of Americans on his hands. Could the capture of Mullah Baradar create a domino effect and deliver the beginning of the end of bin Laden? Or is this going to be a Tora Bora redux, another wasted opportunity? I'm Jamal Dajani for the Mosaic Intelligence Report. To learn more about this program or to share your thoughts, visit us at linktv.org/mir. You can also follow my updates on Twitter.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.